it's very interesting, the changes and the growth that COVID has brought to all of us. At least for me, it's really brought to light this calling that I never thought that I had. I did actually have it as a child, as a young woman, and then kind of lost it from a perspective of vibrationally. And then I found my way back in the most weird way, unexpectedly. And it's interesting because I posted, I don't know how many of you have had a moment to hear the video that I posted yesterday. It came into my feed unexpectedly, and I've always been incredibly, hi Janet, I've always been incredibly fascinated by near-death experiences, and people that have recalled near-death experiences. I've read books on it. I've heard so many stories about near-death experiences, but for whatever reason, this particular story, the way that she explained it and the way that she went through it was so easy to digest. She made it so eloquently said that it was so easy to understand for me. And it hit me really hard, and it reminded me of a lot of things. It reminded me of how we are always connected. Okay, we're always connected, but that in fact, what happens to us is that we are the ones that choose to disconnect from our God, from our source, from our creator, from the one that made us, right? We are the ones that place judgment on our own actions and separate ourselves from our God. So how many of you have had a chance to see it? I think only Lily had commented, no? So I highly encourage you to go through the interview. And if you get a chance, see part 2 that I posted as well. Because even though it repeats a little bit, there's some other nuggets of information there that I feel are so powerful. And it's a little bit long, but you'll get right through it. You'll feel like, oh my God, you want it to last longer. There are so many beautiful nuggets of information there. And 2 messages came in this week for me in the most unusual way. Okay. And that's why I chose to speak about this subject of judgment, because and on this call, I've said it many, many times that when we judge, we don't love, right? It's an act of non-loving. It's an act of separation from God. And it's funny because those of us that have, been taught in our religions, a lot of religion talks about judgment, right? The judgment day, you will be judged, and all of that. And it's funny because it kind of gets ingrained inside of you in a very strange way. But for me, judgment, whenever we are judging or judging someone or even judging ourselves, we are not in a state of alignment with the ultimate energy, which is love, right? So how do we dive in to that statement that when we judge, we don't love? Because what I think is when you're placing judgment, you're actually in a state of fear. It's the opposite of love, which we know, right? We know that the opposite of love is fear. And the funniest thing, the message came in the oddest way, and I'm going to tell the story. So I was at a restaurant with my husband and Gabby, and we were out to dinner this week. And I was looking around all of the waiters and waitresses, right? And I noticed that all of the waiters and waitresses had all the waitresses, especially that had long hair, all of them had their hair up, picked up really nice and tight in a little ponytail or in something very, very neat. and their hair, all of them looked kind of the same, right? Everybody was taking care to pick up their hair, right? And that's not the only restaurant. And I noticed this because I go to Hillstones a lot. I don't know how many of you have gone to Hillstones, but in Hillstones, if you go to Hillstones, they are the same way. They have an amazing training on their service staff, and all of their service staff is always perfectly neat, like their hair. Even if the women have super short hair, they do their best to like pick that hair up and put it back and super tight. And it caught my attention from a perspective of my judgment. Okay. And I wondered, why do they enlist this to make sure that their hair is all picked up and everybody is super neat? And I started thinking about that, and I said, oh, it's because they want us to think that everything about them in that restaurant is super neat and organized, right? So they want us to judge their staff as well-groomed and prepared, right? And that took me down this whole other rabbit hole of information. I was like, okay, so how many times do we judge someone just by their hair? And mommy, what a perfect moment to jump into this call because I'm talking about hair. And recently, my mom decided, finally, after so many years, to go gray, right? And she looks beautiful. I think she looks amazing with this gray hair. And she has kept it all her life, super, super, super short, right? But always in a strong color, like mainly red, right, Mom? Almost always red and very strong and very tight to her hair, to her head. In fact, I only have known my mom to have long hair one time. Okay, one time when she gave it an attempt to grow it, and it was like what she is, she's Leo, the lion, and it was like this big, right? So she's always kept it like this, and she decided to be gray now. And that made me think as well about
White.
Well,
White.
yes. Okay, gray. It's not gray, it's white. It's pure snow white, which is beautiful. And it made me think about how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us once our hair turns gray or white, right? And how it's so accepted for men, right? Men turn gray and it's not a big deal. Women turn gray and it's a big deal, right? And how many other things are attached to hair? I mean, most of you know that my granddaughters, okay, my beautiful twin granddaughters are biracial. So when they were born, you know, we were wondering, right, what kind of hair were they going to have, right? And of course, they have this beautiful mane of super, super, super curly, 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 tight hair. The kind of hair that I have no idea how to manage whatsoever. But it's interesting because as we're strolling down the street, and the perception of this has changed slightly, as we're strolling down the street and I have them in the stroller, everybody knows, because their skin, by the way, is super light. Their skin is super light, and you wouldn't be able to tell that they are biracial if they weren't for their hair. The minute that people see their hair, they immediately know that they are biracial, right? And trust me when I tell you, inside my heart sometimes says, are they being judged? How are they being judged? And it worries me because I know that our society judges us immediately, and especially from our hair. Now, the reason I tell all of these stories is because I want you to take a moment to think about when you place judgment on others without really knowing anything more than the superficiality of their hair, right? We do this all the time. It's natural. It's a human condition to place judgment. And I don't know if it has to do with survival. Sometimes maybe we just, immediately look at someone and judge if they're going to hurt us or not by their physical appearance or by their energy. But what I want you to think about is to go beyond and catch yourself when you are in a state of judgment. Because when you're in a state of judgment, like I said before, you're not in a state of love. You are almost always in a state of fear. Your conditions are coming up as a guard to say, I've got to perceive what's going on out here if it's going to hurt me, right? Or affect me in a negative way. It's almost like a survival technique. But the goal of being an awakened soul, and this is where the prayer namaste comes from, is I see the light in you that is the same as the light in me. And it has nothing to do with the superficial aspects of ourselves, the exterior shell that we are in and we chose to be in this lifetime. So what judgments are you placing with your hair? Or what judgments are you placing with yourself? Because I'm sure my mom struggled, I think, when she was going to make this choice. And I've struggled with it too, because I can tell you, I may not be as snow white as her, but I am completely gray, completely. And it's taken me a long time to think about, am I ready to let that go? Am I ready to show up as my pure, authentic physical form, right? How many times do we do that? And we are worried about things and being judged ourselves. It's like, will they think that I'm old? Will they not see me as who I am, a vibrant woman that feels very young, right? How will I be judged by my hair? How many of you have had that experience or think about that? So much is attached to this, right?
Yeah.
And ironically, like the baldness, again, for the men can bald. And even though it does affect them, okay, because I've seen a lot of guys that get affected by their baldness, right? But it's not as severe as a baldness in a woman, right? Baldness in a woman is like, what? That's like weird. And it's interesting how things are changing in our perception, because, for example, I'll give you another example of the physical form that people used to judge harshly: tattoos. Okay, so tattoos, which is an elective thing, right? People choose to tattoo their body or not, right? Tattoos have become a shift completely. Like before, tattoos were really looked down upon. And today, tattoos are really like nonchalant, like nobody really thinks about it so much anymore, unless it's like a major statement all over your body. And then it's almost like somebody's saying, oh, what kind of a statement are they making, right? It's almost like, now the older generation probably still feels the way that tattoos are negative, because that's how they grew up. In the 1950s and in the I think all the way through the 1950s, probably anyone that had a tattoo was looked down upon. And especially a woman having a tattoo was looked down upon. But that's really not happened. So I wonder, how will we feel several decades from now about these stigmas having to do with hair? Or how do we still feel today about a biracial relationship? And I see constantly on the covers of magazines, the, relationships, homosexual or gay relationships being very, very prominent and important, and even having families and shown on like the cover of Architectural Digest this month is Nate Berkus with his partner and his 2 children. So it's like we're starting to change our judgments and our conditions. But at the end of the day, is that what I wonder is, does it unify us? Are we going towards unity? Or are we going towards division? How much is still unified and how much is still divided? Because the point of all of this is for us to become unified as one species, one spirit, connected. Judgment comes from a state of fear. You mentioned that you judge. Sometimes you catch yourself judging because you feel that someone might hurt you. So this is what I meant about the essence of judgment being based on fear, which is the opposite of love, right? So we get fearful, or we get fearful with ourselves, let's say for a simple thing like turning our hair gray, allowing our hair to turn gray. We're afraid, right? Think about it. We're afraid of being judged for all of a sudden being old. Like, how could the color of our hair change from one moment to the next the perception of who we really are inside, right? That's number one. You know what comes to mind? Cruella, right? Have you guys seen the new version of Disney, Cruella, right? Where she is born with half of her hair white, like Cruella de Vil, the story of her as she grows up. You guys got to watch that movie. It's
it's amazing.
Right? Isn't it great? Okay. And she she's born literally as a little girl with a white patch of hair, right? Like Dalmatian, hence why it gets the black and white. And she's immediately judged as some kind of evil child, right? Because she's so weird. Like, what is that? And it's just hair. I mean, think about it, how silly it is, right? It's so ridiculously silly, but it causes in us a sensation of something to fear, right? So then she goes on and she embodies that perception that others have for her. Isn't that interesting, right? All of a sudden, you embody the perception that others project towards you. And that is something that is disempowering, if you think about it, right? We're striving as awakened spiritual beings to be empowered in our own connectivity to the one source, which is love. The one, that's it. There is no such thing. After we cross over and this body doesn't exist anymore, there is nothing but love. That's it. In fact, one of the most amazing things about this video that I shared with you guys, both part 1 and part 2, and I'm going to go back to an anecdote within that video that I want you guys to pay attention to, is a moment in which this lady that is sharing her near-death experience is a nurse, right? So she's in the hospital and there's other nurses and so on. And there's one particular nurse that she just doesn't like. She doesn't feel good about, it's like she judges her because she's not as good a nurse as she should be. Like, for example, she gives an example that she'll leave a patient on the bedpan for a long period of time instead of coming in to take the bedpan out, right? And she thought, and this, when she passes over in one of her near-death experience, because imagine that she's had 18 of them. She has lost consciousness and stopped breathing 18 times. It's crazy. So she's had quite a few. And she talks about literally, talking to God, during that process. So In one of those instances, God shows her a scenery. She says she thought that she was being a good person by not gossiping about this nurse that was her colleague. And she said, I hate gossip. I really don't like gossip. So I would never say anything about her to anyone else, right? And what God showed her was, let me show you who she is, right? And he flashes to her childhood and shows how abused she was as a child by her own father, even sexually. And this woman, even after she sees the vision of what this woman had as an experience, as a childhood experience, she sees that it's a miracle that that woman isn't a monster, and that despite her abuse, she actually wanted to do good and became a nurse to care for others. So even if she's not the best nurse of all, she actually chose to be a good person, even though she had been so abused as a child. And immediately, the lady that is having the experience said to God, oh my God, I've judged her. I've judged her without knowing her. And her heart opens up, and the compassion for this woman just wells up inside of her. And she realizes how judgmental she had been, even though she never said an unkind word to this person. And God says, you don't have to say it. Of course, you reinforce with words, you reinforce with actions, but just the thought is already a judgment. And that blew her away, because she says, you hear everything and see everything in me. Okay. And another story that she tells during this video is that when she's in her experience, because she was in a coma, she had two different experiences. She was in a coma for 5 days, right? And she has a life review with God. And God shows her different moments in her life that she did things that she was like, and she explains it's super cute because it's very easy to understand. She doesn't do it in this very high and mighty way. She actually jokes throughout the whole process. So she says, here I am thinking, oh my God, he's got to pick something really great because I'm a nurse. I take care of people. I know he's going to pick some amazing thing that I did for a patient and blah, blah, blah. And the experience that he shows her is when she's standing in line at the grocery store, and the lady in front of her doesn't have enough money to pay for all the items that she's gotten. And she can see how ashamed this lady feels. And she's looking for what she can take out of her pile of things to be able to pay, to have enough. And she was literally short just less than $1, like 72 cents or something like this. And she takes the money out of her bag and she pays for the lady. And the lady looks at her so embarrassed, so ashamed. It's like, oh my God. And she says, don't worry. I've been there. Because she can see that she's getting things for her children like macaroni and cheese. And what she took out was the moisturizer that she was buying for herself. She says, okay, I don't need the moisturizer, but I need the macaroni and cheese for my kids, right? And she takes out those 72 cents and gives it to the lady so that she can take all of her items. And that's what God showed her as the act, the grand act. And the reason she brought that story up is because she says, we think that we need to do these grand acts. We think that we have to, like, do incredible things. And it's the daily little acts of kindness, the little things that are important. It's the moments of pure love, human to human, soul to soul connection that are important, or just as important as the big things too. Yes, Mom.
Paying it forward.
Exactly. And in fact, here's what's really interesting. I'm so glad you said paying it forward, because then he flashes to future event of that woman that she gave 72 cents with to. He flashes forward and she's in a soup kitchen giving away food, and does the same thing to others that was done to her that day on the grocery store line. So we don't really understand the ripple effect of our acts, but we need to pay attention to the ability that we have to pay it forward, to act in a way that is in our highest and greatest expression of love, because that is what God is recognizing, because that's alignment with the vibration of love, not aligning with the vibration of fear, which is judgment. So pay attention to the little things that happen to you this week, and the moments in which you're looking at others in ways that are not in alignment with that state of love, when you're judging and when you're not seeing the light within someone else. And what was really noticeable to me in that story was how she had placed judgments on this woman's behavior as a nurse, that she wasn't good enough, when in fact, what she could have done was, hey, I'll get that bedpan for you, right? And not really judge her, just help her, to show her a better way of being a nurse with kindness. Instead of not staying quiet, she was thinking it's enough to not say bad things about this woman. But it's not. You can take it a step further and completely dive into a loving state. And trust me, as human beings, we're constantly in this battle of falling backwards, like Carol says, like falling back into our habits of judgment and looking at others in ways that are not from our heart. Take it from me, a person that has felt these days, I'm so in my heart that it's a little scary to me. I'm going to confess. I'm still kind of getting used to my new heartfelt ways. And it's interesting because I always thought that I've been a loving person, but when my heart broke open, and I recognized the difference between how I felt before and how I feel today, I guess the best way to describe it is to say that I am incredibly vulnerable. And I'll cry at the drop of a hat because, you know, I can't help it. Everything makes me cry. And I feel such a difference in myself that what she mentioned, she says that after her near-death experiences, that her heart literally broke open, because for the first 5 days of the coma, and I know I'm giving it away, but you're going to love looking at the interview anyway. The first 5 days of the coma felt like 10 years in darkness, because she says that on the other side, time doesn't feel the same way it feels here, and that she was literally in darkness. Like she was afraid that she couldn't get out, until she finally figured out that she could in fact move in that darkness, that she could project her body, not her body or her energy, forward in the darkness. And that all of a sudden she saw a crack in the darkness where the light was shining through. And on the other side came more light, and she heard a voice. And she heard a voice inside of her head that said, "I'm coming for you, my angel." And when the light came through, it was her grandmother that was coming to get her out of the darkness. And after that, she felt her heart break open, and that the darkness was actually self-inflicted, that she was in the dark of her own making. Nobody put her in the dark. It was her own protective mechanism to not be vulnerable, to not have her heart broken open, because she had been divorced. She was angry. She was angry at her divorce. She was angry that her son and her children, the father wasn't involved in the life, that she was living a single mom, that she was struggling. And that darkness, okay, was self-created. And the reason that I bring this up, guys, is because all of our darkness is self-created. All of it. It's a lack of love. But with love comes vulnerability. If we really want to express who we truly are in that loving state of awakened spirituality, like Carol referenced, okay, we have to have our heart broken open. We have to be all heart. And that's scary. It's as scary as 10 years of darkness. Okay? So remember to not judge, and even not judge yourself. And like Carol said so appropriately, forgive yourself first. Forgive yourself first. Because being vulnerable is an act of love. Allowing yourself to love. I was talking to Deb, and I don't think she's on the call today, but I was talking to Deb this week, and I told her that the perfect example of that comes up for me every single time is Diane Keaton on the stoop, on the beach, in that movie, Something's Gotta Give. How many of you guys have seen this movie, right? That scene in which she's sitting on the beach steps, crying her eyes out over having allowed herself to fall in love with Jack Nicholson, right? The playboy of the playboys, the one that rips open her turtleneck. How symbolic is that, right? When he cuts it with a scissor. And she's crying on those steps, bawling her eyes out, and her daughter comes up to her and says, "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you crying like this? What is wrong?" She's like, "I am so happy." and her daughter saying, "What do you mean you're happy? You're miserable. Look at you, you're crying." She says, "I actually loved." And that's how it feels. Yes, such a great movie. Such a great movie. Because yes, it hurts. It hurts to have your heart broken open. It's scary. But if we don't let our heart break open, we remove the joy along with the pain. When it's closed, and trust me, I tell you from personal experience, even when you think you're loving, you're not fully. not completely, not unconditionally, not in that pure, open-hearted state, as innocent as a child. And that's why we protect our children, because they can be hurt. And when I think about my little granddaughters with their beautiful curly afro hair, I fear them getting hurt by someone that could judge them. But at the same time, I know that they must live their life fully and experience those moments of contrast so that they can understand the difference of how to love themselves. Yes, Mom.
You have to raise them strong.
Exactly.
Look that.
I know. But I think about it, trust me.
I know. I think about it too. I'm their great grandmother, remember?
I know. Trust me. I look at that hair every morning that's out to here, and I love it. And I think it's beautiful. And I worry because I want to protect them, but I can't.
They have to learn to protect themselves. They
Yes,
have their own self-esteem.
exactly. And I pray that they will go into this world with the strength to love themselves so much that no one would dare to judge them for their hair. That's what I pray every day. And that's what I pray for all of you. To love yourself enough, the way God loves you. Because in that video, she says, God loves you, every little cell of you, exactly as he created you. It's in your DNA. He made you exactly as you are. And that's pure love. Pure love. So let your hearts be open, guys, even if it hurts. Remember that when you shut it, you shut out everything. Along with the pain that you shut, it becomes darkness. And then you don't feel the joy. You just don't. So think about this week where you may be judging yourself harshly, where your fears lie. What are you afraid of? And go out with an open heart. Trust me, it's a hell of a lot better than with it closed. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I've got Raquel that I hadn't seen in a long time. Denise, Tatiana, you're back. It's so wonderful to see Grace with us today. I'm so happy that you're with us and that you're on your way to good health and happiness. It hit me this week. It's like, talk about hair, B. Like, what? Talk about hair? Because God sends really strange messages, I'm telling you. It's like, hair? Why hair?
I know.
And it made such perfect sense because catch yourself, watch yourself, look, pay attention to the moments when you are judging someone over something as silly as hair. And our children, I think every day I'm hopeful that we are growing in our ability to embrace all of ourselves, every one of us, but we'll make a judgment. Like this week, I went to Target and there was this family, a woman, her husband, and baby in arms, begging. And I was, and it's funny. And then there was a lady under the bridge as I crossed through Bird Road, and my heart was hurting. And I went over and I gave them some money, and I felt bad, but I immediately like went into the homeless judgment. It's like, they're young people. Why don't they get a job? You know, like my brain went there. My brain went there and judged. My brain went there and judged. And I don't know their story. I don't know if she's sick, if her family's sick, she couldn't have a house. Who knows what her circumstances are? But I went there for a second, and then I shifted and I said, no, I'm not going to judge why they're there. I'm going to do whatever I can. And I reached into my purse and I walked over. And I'm like, you know, who the hell cares what their situation is? Nobody wants to be standing out there with a sign, okay? No one. So there's going to be instances every moment of your life, every day, that are as significant as the 72 cents that this woman gave the person in front of her. And those are the ones that count, the little things. Yes, Mom?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that do take advantage, and it happened to the wife of your cousin Willie when he was married to the psychologist, and it was in San Francisco. And she had a patient who came to her as a psychologist who was not all well off, but she was doing all right, and she had a daughter. And on one weekend, she found her with her daughter and a sign begging for money that she did not need.
It's
And
okay, Mom, though. But see,
it made her very, very sad because she wasn't thinking of her that way. So it happens, you know.
of course,
don't judge. You're right.
but again, what does it matter? The question that I ask myself is, this money that I give to them right now,
Mhm.
does it matter why? What
No.
does it affect me? Like, is it something that I need right this minute? Like, do I need to hold on to this?
Right. Right.
And I said, absolutely not. I pay more in parking in Coral Gables, for God's sakes.
Right.
I mean, seriously. I mean, and you know what? It maybe they are not needing it. Maybe they aren't. Who knows? It's not about them. It's about me.
Right. It's their karma, not yours.
Yes. How do I want to show up? How do I want to show up? So again, it's a judgment. And I went there, by the way. I did. I thought, wow, these young people, why aren't they going out and finding a job? What's the situation they're in? I almost asked them. I almost said, is there anything I can do to help you other than just give you some money right now? I almost did that. And next time I will.
But B, I don't see that as judgment. I just see that as curiosity.
True, but in one of my mind said, why would they be doing this? You know, this man is a young man. He looks strong. He looks fine. He probably could go and get a job. You know what I'm saying? In my mind, I went there, and then I said, okay, no, I don't need to go there. I'm not going to judge this situation. I'm just going to do what I think is right for me right now. Yes.
I think it might have been the same family that I saw getting off the ramp of the Palmetto to get to the office.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's the same family, but by the description, it does. If the area was that, and
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it one morning, and I was close to that left lane, and I felt the same thing. And you know, me and homeless, right? So I know that I don't judge them, because otherwise I would never do what I do for them. But at the same time, that thought came to mind. It's like, why would you be asking for money? And I started training my mind in the last few years, asking instead of judging. You know, you're not disabled physically, that you cannot work because you're walking, you're normal, like it looks normal.
Right.
So of course the judgment always came up.
Right.
But I always told myself, yes, we don't know the true story. We have no idea what their backgrounds are.
Right.
I have no idea, and it's not for me to decide.
No.
So I feel that if I want to, I'll give money. And usually I don't like giving money per se. That's why we go and give food
Yeah.
more of just money. But in that case, I couldn't, just give it. I had no,
You had no
to
food,
give.
right? That's what I
No
did. I
food.
didn't have any food to give, and they and the paperwork said, I need money for food and rent.
Right.
This is what it said. The sign. So and again, it for me. Let me tell you what it was for me. The message. Whenever I receive a message directly from source, which is how I do these talks, because every week I wait for the download. I do not plan ahead, as you know, Florinda. I don't know what's going to come up in the
Right.
week for me to talk about. I don't. It comes to me.
Right.
It started out me directing the show. Now I do not direct the show. I can tell you the first few ones of this call that I decided what I was going to speak about did start from me. After that, they don't start from me. I listen to the message that comes in that week. And this week, that situation that I was in, I gave thanks for the message. So many things came in to tell me to speak about judgment and love. So many vulnerability and your heart being broken open. Those were the messages that came in this week. And that person, that family that was asking for money or asking for help was part of the message that was serving me to serve you. You understand? That's how it works. I listen. One of the best advantages of having your heart be open is that you are connected to the higher self, your higher self in connection with source. That is the beautiful thing. That's what I find. That communication, I hope, never goes away, because I know how lonely it feels to not have it. In fact, when I don't have a message in the early part of the week, I start praying. I'm like, okay, where are you? I need you. I'm here. Help me serve. Help me serve. And undoubtedly, it always comes. Always. So we are all here to serve. We're all here to serve. And we all can serve in our own little ways, even if it means giving 72 cents to the person in front of you. Never take a single act of kindness for granted and the ripple effects that it will have across the world. Trust me. Never. Okay? Have a beautiful week, guys. Thank you all for showing up for me today, especially that so many of our group were not here. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see who comes in. And look, it's a beautiful, beautiful crowd of beautiful women. Thank you for coming on with me today.
Did you